September 17th, 1944. You're Lieutenant Tommy Harrison of the British 1st Airborne Division, sitting in a C-47 transport plane over Holland. Below you, the Dutch countryside stretches out like a green carpet dotted with windmills and canals. In 30 minutes, you'll be jumping into what your commanders promise will be the operation that ends World War II by Christmas. The plan sounds almost too good to be true. Drop 3 airborne divisions behind German lines, capture a series of bridges, and open a corridor straight into the heart of Germany. A bridge too far, some pessimist called it. But Field Marshal Montgomery is convinced this will work, and Tommy trusts Monty. After all, they've come this far. What Tommy doesn't know as he prepares to jump is that 2 SS Panzer divisions are refitting just miles from his landing zone. He doesn't know that the radios his unit will carry don't work properly. He doesn't know that the intelligence reports showing light German resistance are completely wrong. Most importantly, Tommy doesn't know that he's about to participate in one of the most audacious military operations in history, a plan so bold it could have ended the war 9 months early, but so flawed it would instead become one of the Allies' most costly failures. Today, I'm going to tell you about Operation Market Garden, the plan that promised to end World War II by Christmas 1944, why Montgomery believed it would work, and how a series of small mistakes turned a brilliant strategy into a disaster that cost thousands of lives. By September 1944, it looked like Nazi Germany was finished. The D-Day landings had succeeded beyond all expectations. Paris had been liberated. Allied armies were racing across France so fast that their biggest problem was running out of fuel. German forces seemed to be collapsing everywhere. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, commanding the British 21st Army Group, saw an opportunity that might end the war in weeks instead of months. If the Allies could punch through the German defenses in Holland, cross the Rhine River, and drive into the industrial heart of Germany, the Nazi regime might collapse entirely. Montgomery's plan was breathtakingly ambitious. Operation Market Garden would use the largest airborne assault in history to capture a series of bridges across the rivers and canals of Holland. Once the bridges were secured, British armored forces would race up a single road, Highway 69, and cross into Germany itself. The operation had 2 parts. Market was the airborne assault. American paratroopers would capture bridges at Eindhoven and Nijmegen, while British paratroopers took the final bridge at Arnhem. Garden was the ground offensive. British tanks would smash through German lines and link up with the airborne forces. General Eisenhower had serious doubts about the plan. It required everything to go perfectly. The paratroopers had to capture all their objectives. The ground forces had to advance exactly on schedule, and the Germans had to react exactly as predicted. But Montgomery was persuasive, and the potential payoff was enormous. The scale of Market Garden was staggering. Over 34,000 paratroopers would be dropped in broad daylight. Nearly 3,000 aircraft would be involved: transports, gliders, fighters, and bombers. It was the largest airborne operation ever attempted, and it had to be executed flawlessly. Tommy Harrison was part of the 1st Airborne Division, tasked with capturing the bridge at Arnhem, the most distant and dangerous objective. His battalion had trained for months, but nothing could really prepare them for what they were about to face. On the morning of September 17th, the largest air armada in history took off from airfields across England. The sky was filled with transport planes, gliders, and fighter escorts. Dutch civilians looked up in amazement as wave after wave of Allied aircraft passed overhead. At first, everything went according to plan. The American 101st Airborne Division captured most of their bridges around Eindhoven with minimal casualties. The 82nd Airborne took Nijmegen after fierce fighting. The ground offensive began on schedule, with British tanks advancing up Highway 69. Tommy Harrison's drop near Arnhem also seemed successful at first. The landing zones were secured, casualties were light, and German resistance appeared minimal. Tommy and his mates began their march toward the bridge, confident they'd be home by Christmas. But the Germans weren't as beaten as the Allies thought. SS-Obergruppenfuhrer Wilhelm Bittrich commanded 2 SS Panzer divisions that were refitting near Arnhem. When the paratroopers landed practically in his lap, Bittrich reacted with devastating speed and efficiency. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, was actually having lunch in Arnhem when the paratroopers landed. Instead of panicking, he calmly organized the defense and began moving reinforcements to block the British advance. Tommy Harrison's first hint that something was wrong came when his unit's radios stopped working. The sets had been tested in England, but the buildings and terrain around Arnhem interfered with the signals. Suddenly, British units couldn't communicate with each other or with headquarters. Only one British battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, actually reached the Arnhem Bridge. Frost's 600 men took the northern end of the bridge and prepared to hold it until the main force arrived. They had no idea they would be fighting alone. The rest of the 1st Airborne Division found themselves cut off and surrounded. German forces had reacted faster than anyone expected, and the British paratroopers were scattered across the Dutch countryside in small, isolated groups. Tommy Harrison's unit was trapped in the suburbs of Arnhem, fighting house to house against SS troops who knew the terrain better than they did. What was supposed to be a quick dash to the bridge had turned into a nightmare of urban warfare. Meanwhile, the ground offensive was falling behind schedule. British tanks were stuck on the single road, Highway 69, which the troops had nicknamed Hell's Highway. German resistance was stronger than expected, and the narrow road created massive traffic jams. At the Arnhem Bridge, John Frost's men were fighting for their lives. German tanks and infantry attacked repeatedly, trying to dislodge the British paratroopers from their positions. Frost's men held on, but they were running out of ammunition, food, and hope. On the 3rd day, Tommy Harrison managed to scribble a quick letter to his wife. "Things aren't going quite as planned, love. The Germans were waiting for us, and we're a bit cut off. Don't worry though, we'll sort this out. Give my love to little Sarah." But the situation was deteriorating rapidly. German reinforcements were arriving faster than Allied forces could advance. The SS Panzer divisions that were supposed to be refitting turned out to be combat-ready and commanded by experienced officers who knew exactly what they were doing. On September 21st, the Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade was dropped south of the river to reinforce the British, but they landed directly into German positions and were scattered before they could organize. The reinforcements became casualties instead of help. After 4 days of fighting, Frost's position at the bridge was finally overrun. The lieutenant colonel was wounded and captured, along with most of his surviving men. The bridge, the key objective of the entire operation, was back in German hands. Tommy Harrison was among the lucky few who managed to escape. On the night of September 25th, he and about 200 other survivors tried to cross the Rhine in small boats. German searchlights swept the water, and machine guns chattered from both banks. Tommy made it across, but barely. He was wounded, exhausted, and traumatized by what he'd seen. Of the 10,000 British paratroopers who had landed at Arnhem, fewer than 2,000 escaped. The rest were dead, wounded, or prisoners. The final cost of Operation Market Garden was staggering. Over 17,000 Allied casualties, including 1,500 dead. Entire airborne units were destroyed. The cream of British airborne forces was gone, and the war would continue for 8 more months. Montgomery insisted that Market Garden was 90% successful because most of the bridges had been captured. But the 10% failure, the bridge at Arnhem, made the entire operation pointless. Without that final bridge, there was no way into Germany. What went wrong? Almost everything. Intelligence reports underestimated German strength. Radio equipment failed at crucial moments. The plan was too complex and required perfect execution. Most critically, the Allies had become overconfident after their rapid advance across France. The Germans, meanwhile, proved they were far from beaten. Officers like Bittrich and Model reacted with speed and skill that caught the Allies completely off guard. The defeated German army showed it could still fight when properly led. The failure also had tragic consequences for Dutch civilians. Many had openly celebrated the Allied landings, expecting liberation. When the operation failed, they faced German reprisals and a terrible winter of starvation known as the Hunger Winter. Tommy Harrison spent weeks in a military hospital, recovering from his wounds and trying to make sense of what had happened. He'd survived one of the war's most ambitious operations, but the cost had been enormous. Historians still debate what might have happened if Market Garden had succeeded. Could the war have ended in 1944? Would the Holocaust have been stopped sooner? Would the Cold War have developed differently? We'll never know, but the possibilities are tantalizing. The operation taught crucial lessons about modern warfare. Intelligence must be accurate and current. Communication systems must be reliable. Complex plans require backup options when things go wrong. Most importantly, overconfidence can be as dangerous as any enemy. Today, the bridge at Arnhem is called the John Frost Bridge, honoring the lieutenant colonel who held it for 4 days against impossible odds. A memorial nearby remembers all the paratroopers who died in the operation. Tommy Harrison survived the war and lived to be 89. He rarely talked about Arnhem, but when he did, he always emphasized the courage of his comrades who didn't make it home. They were the real heroes, he would say. I just got lucky. Operation Market Garden remains one of history's great what-ifs. A plan so bold, it nearly ended World War II early, but so flawed, it became a costly reminder that in war, even the best plans can go catastrophically wrong. The plan that promised to end the war by Christmas 1944, instead, taught the Allies that there are no shortcuts to victory. Sometimes the boldest plans are also the most dangerous, and the bridge too far is the one that costs you everything. But perhaps the real lesson of Market Garden isn't about military strategy or tactical failures. It's about the courage of ordinary men like Tommy Harrison and John Frost, who risked everything for a plan they believed in, even when that plan was flawed from the start. If you found this story of ambition, courage, and costly failure as compelling as I did, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the videos on your screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.